Hey guys, so today we're going to quickly go over some basics with Bifrost, and we're also going to go over a snow simulation that I'll teach you guys. So before we actually get into the simulation, there's just a few things that I need to talk about. Snow is actually one of the hardest and trickiest simulations that can be done because of its changing effect that snow has on itself. With friction, density, and how fast the snow melts, it all plays effect in the final outcome. Because of this, render times on snow scenes can actually take anywhere from 30 seconds to 30 minutes a frame. So let's keep that in mind while we jump into Maya. Now before we get started, there's two things that we actually need to do. We'll come down here, check this little loop, we'll also right click on our timeline and click on playback speed and set the playback speed to play every frame max real time. And now we can get started. After that, we just want to click on the Bifrost tab and then click on these buttons up here, which will open the graph editor. Now we'll just click create new graph and it'll show us this. Now we just need to add our objects. So we'll press tab and we'll search up sphere. And we'll click create mesh sphere. Then we'll do the same thing and we'll create a plane. Now that we have those, we'll see that we actually can't see them in the viewport. So we'll plug those both in and we'll see that we can finally see them. However, they're on top of each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the position of the Y of the sphere to 5. And we're also going to change the length and width of the plane to both be 15. To add the simulation, we're just going to press tab and look up npm snow. We're going to click the first one we see, and then we'll also get simulate _ npm. Lastly, what we need is npm solver settings. And now we can get started with the simulation. Now, all we need to do is go to our sphere mesh. Let me just make this bigger. Go to our sphere mesh, and we're just going to plug the npm snow source into the geometry. Next, we're going to plug the source into the source in the simulate. So we'll just plug those two together, and then we'll plug the settings into the settings in the simulate. Now all we need to do is plug the granular particles into its own new output. So we'll just plug it into the plus here, and it'll give it its own new section. We'll see once we press play that the ball will actually drop through the ground, which is not what we want. So let's add some collision to this ground here. We'll jump back into our graph editor and we'll see this collision in the simulate. So we'll get a collider by pressing tab and type in collider, and we'll just plug that in there. Now we want our ground to be the geometry for our collider, so we'll make a new branch from our plane and we'll plug that into the collider. Let's have a look. That's working perfectly. Now let's tinker with some of the snow settings to give us variation. Now, in our graph editor, there's two ways to make a big impact with our snow simulation. There's the npm _ snow source, and also these solver settings, which we can see we want to change the detail size. So in detail size, increasing or decreasing the amount of detail size will change the amount of particles, as you can see. But we're just going to keep it at 0.15. There's also all of these other settings, which I won't go into. However, if you do click on info, you can scroll down and see everything that it has. Now let's look at the snow settings. We're going to get a test run here, and then we'll do a side by side. So with all of these settings, let's press play and see what happens. We can see that there's a lot of spread, there's not large clumps, and the snow is actually sliding a lot on the ground. So in our graph editor, we're going to change the max density to 275. We're going to change the viscosity to 0.002. And we're also going to change the friction from 0.3 to 0.5. Now we're going to give that a go and we'll see how it shows. We'll see that the snow is all staying together and that the snow isn't sliding as much on the ground, and it's more in a clump rather than flattening. Now if we open our graph editor, we can see that there's a lot of other settings for the snow that we can tinker with. However, I'm not going to go into them just yet. I'll let you explore those with the Info tab, which will tell you all about them. Now, snow can be very useful and add a lot to your scene, from someone walking through clumps of powdered snow to a car tire driving along a snowy path. It all makes a big impact, and that's why snow simulations are one of the best simulations. So I think that'll be the end of today's snow tutorial. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you've actually learned something.